Hello and good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are and what time is there. Today, I would like to go over CPaaS and how the cloud communication market is going over a revolution, who the new players are, and what is there left to be taken. So I'm going to be starting by describing a little bit about myself and telling you the story of CPaaS while also telling you why it is not about willing the developer anymore. And finally, I want to give some light about what is the cloud communication market direction at this moment and leave you with some takeaways. So first of all, you might be wondering who the hell is this guy and why should I even waste my time listening to him? I like to believe I'm coming from the best of the two worlds, software engineering and telecommunications. I've spent all my career in telecommunications and I did almost everything that you can do there, from software development, system engineering, standardization, you name it. Essentially, that gives me a very good ability to speak to a vast audience of people and different kind of people and different kind of profiles, from software development folks to old school telco folks. And I'm currently with 8x8 as a solution engineering. And for this presentation, I will actually would like to tell you why. Why am I with 8x8 at this moment? Why do I believe that 8x8 is doing something unique in the cloud communications market and the cloud communications world? And why it excites me so much to be part of this journey? But to start, let's go back in time and let me tell you a bit of, the overall story of CPaaS. I think that will help you, hopefully, to understand why the usual suspects are not doing enough for the next chapter on cloud communications, and why do I think that 8x8 is actually better positioned to tackle those. So early 2000s, the dot-com boom, phones with some sort of internet access became very popular thanks to WAP and services like GPRS. For the first time, people wanted to do more with their phones than just phone calls and SMS. They wanted to personalize their phones with background images, ringtones. Ultimately, they wanted to do more than just peer-to-peer communication. They wanted to subscribe to news and sports updates. And brands started to look, consumer brands started to look at people's phones as a marketing target too. And obviously that pointed out to predominantly SMS campaigns, but also other kinds of engagement. People would subscribe whether through any other SMS or a short code or even USSD through GPRS to all this kind of news service. So it was a new open door for everyone in the mobile industry. And actually, my first job was precisely in the messaging team of the largest telecom operator in Portugal. I'll make sure to make a pause here for you all to go to my LinkedIn profile and see what that was. That team was dealing, among other SMS related stuff like building and maintaining the SMSC. But one of the key things this team was actually doing was exposing service to value-added services providers. So back then, it wasn't really easier as it is today to get a telecom license and operate in the country. So if you wanted to use the network for any reason, you actually had to go to the operator directly and ask some kind of access to it. So that's what my team back in the days was doing, and that was actually my first job. So my team had a sort of an SMSC gateway in place, enhanced with a Java-based proprietary protocol that was built obviously in-house, and the VAS provider will directly add to this architecture the component that was using that proprietary protocol. So it would interconnect directly to the operator architecture using some sort of WebSocket. Whenever the VAS provider wanted to send a message, it would just call that, make a call to that protocol to tell the operator the source, the destination, and count it, right? So the impressive thing is that this was already like 10 or 11 years ago, and without calling it that way, or people even speaking about too much about cloud services back in the old days. I mean, we were already drafting what it became later on the first sort of a CPaaS offering. We were effectively exposing an API, obviously built in-house. It was not web-based, whatever, but it was an API that we were exposing to be used by an external service. And that's essentially what people call these days a CPaaS provisioning. So if you fast forward 10 years, the dot-com bubble exploded, and the as a service became basically the rule. Internet companies started to gain space and relevance against the local network operators. So the consumer was not really relying on their traditional telco services to communicate. They were already giving the first steps into what we know today as WhatsApps of the world, the Facebooks of the world, etc. I mean, telecom licenses also became much easier to obtain in the meantime. There was some democratization in that aspect. So it started to become really hard for local operators to actually monopolize access to those network services, to SMS or voice. So as things were moving to IP, even the SMS was also moving to IP when the SNMP server became widely used. So it was not anymore only about SS7 gateways, etc. So obviously you still have to do those, and not only about map, but things became generally easier to do, and it was attracting a new world of companies. I mean, it also became much easier to develop application as well. I mean, if you look at the old school languages such as Java and C and C++, I mean, still obviously widely used, especially on the service side. They gave much space and to other easier to use frameworks like JavaScript. So I would risk saying that in the late 2000s, everyone could actually write a line of code or two. I mean, taking advantage of this Panorama, a company that was founded in 2008 to look at this space left empty by the disappearance of the VAS providers. And with so many developers out there, I mean, they thought of replacing the old way of doing things and interconnecting with the networks like the VAS services providers were doing before. I mean, they replaced this technology by what developers were actually using those days. I mean, JavaScript, Python, PHP, Ruby, and so on. I mean, no more proprietary protocols, or not so much the need for that usage. And obviously, I mean, everyone knows that company was Twilio. So, I mean, when Twilio came up, it was the beginning of the end for the traditional way of doing value-added services as we knew it 10 years ago. This was 10 years ago, but I mean, what I would really like to stress in this presentation is really that Twilio was focusing on the developer, obviously, but it is not about wheeling the developer anymore, like today, right? So, I mean, Twilio's classic billboard is now, I don't know, maybe 5 years old, and it came around when they were preparing the jump for the IPO. I mean, it made absolutely sense back then when their new and shiny APIs were aiming directly every web developer's heart. They took old-fashioned VAS providers' business away with a new and shiny web API self-service portal. I mean, all those fancy things that developers were actually looking for back in the days. And then they even create their own markup language, XML-based, the TWIML, the famous TWIML. That was so widely used that became a CPaaS standard. I mean, almost every company in the CPaaS space today has some sort of TWIML flavor. I mean, they call it whatever, but it's a TWIML flavor. The first half of 2010 decade was like the dot-com bubble 2.0, if I can call it this way. and observed the boom of the whatever as a service startup. So the distance between the CTO and a developer was smaller or often non-existent, because we would find new startups up to 10 to 15 staff developers, and the CTO was even still coding back then. So when this billboard came out to see the day of light, influencers were indeed the developers. A good decision made by a developer will tell you whether a project will take even 10 weeks or 10 months to get finished. I mean, Twilio would quickly know what language the developer was speaking just by looking at the job offers in the Silicon Valley. So they would just add to create an API for that, and that's it. But still, is it still valid in 2020? I mean, this was around 2015, 2014, 2015. I mean, is this still valid today in 2020? I mean, I don't think so. So between 2005 and 2015, as I said, we observed an explosion on the internet and digital companies from San Francisco to Berlin. I mean, the .com 2.0 revolution was really aiming at the traditional way of doing everything and replacing it by a web service. These companies were mainly boosted by software engineers, sometimes representing up to maybe 70% of their staff. I mean, CPaaS companies obviously flourished by then, especially from 2010 to 2015. And as I said before, API-based communications powered companies like Uber to make calls, Revolut to send one-time passwords, Foodora to send notifications, and so on. And that's the left side, the left square I have here. I mean, what changed around 2015? I believe that traditional business and Fortune 500 companies, they had to strike back as they were losing businesses for the internet and digital native companies. However, most of these companies were not structured or ready to adopt a methodology like CPaaS or similar web and cloud-based solutions. One of the issues was really that on the opposite to internet companies, technical staff was predominantly formed by back-end engineers and system administrators. Maybe you find a couple of product managers, but maybe they didn't even know how to code. And obviously, Twilio was not really targeted at this kind of companies. I mean, they really struggled to enter in this sector. Still, there was a lot of money on the table, which means that CPaaS companies had to adapt their approach by offering not only web APIs, but also highly customized visual flow-based solutions. And I think these low-code or no-code solutions were aimed at predominantly at the product management, and that they didn't know what to code, but still wanted to build something like an IVR or a messaging application, and they wanted to do it fast. So I think there was a shift in that during that period. Companies also realized that going this way, the overall application development time to market would sometimes be cut in half. Even developers, people who knew what to code, were still relying on this low code or high level visual designer solutions, because it was much easier and much faster to build something that was smaller, simpler to use, so they could shorten the time to market significantly. And obviously, solutions this way were more simple, which means also more easy to maintain in long term. So even those very same internet companies started to fall back to this whenever the solution was easier enough to do this, right? And it's still CPaaS. It's not an API driven building. Call it like that. Let's call it like that way. But it's still very much CPaaS, right? I mean, with all those traditional and Fortune 500 companies consuming cloud communication services in the market evolved to adapt and to follow the CPaaS trend. So we were embracing a new set of companies and a new market using cloud communications. Companies who were traditional focused on SIP trunking or telephony wholesale, sometimes even selling to CPaaS providers themselves on the voice side of things, developed their own APIs or acquired companies who did. So it was a fairly simple move considering most of their systems were asterisk or either asterisk or free switch based. So um, most of the systems already had some sort of raw methods for you to expose this kind of functionality. So it was easy enough to wrap your own APIs around those and offer them as such, right? Another move from these companies was development and offer of Twiml markup-based languages and APIs. And with this move, the message was obviously clear, right? So they were aiming directly at the Twilio, the existing Twilio customer base, and sole focus was to ease the migration. It was not necessarily offering anything new. Was just trying to attract Twilio customers and hopefully think that price would be significantly lower there. I think that is pretty clear in the marketing message and technology portfolio those companies were putting out there. The problem here is that, and the reason why I believe that is a failed approach is that, apart from a good story here and there, all those companies will attract what I will call the Twilio leftovers, and essentially they will need to lower price and or offering more custom methods control to make a difference. So essentially, these companies are looking to get the same Twilio business was getting maybe 5 years ago, just at a lower price, not necessarily offering something else. And guys, this is 2020. On the other side, we got a lot of new players, some already well established in the market of cloud communications, and they've seen an opportunity to go after the other half of the client base I mentioned earlier. So in many cases, these companies were already offering some sort of cloud communications, maybe cloud contact centers or unified communications to these traditional and Fortune 500 verticals. Um, I think it would be an easy move, right? So it was an easy move in most cases through a merger or an acquisition of smaller CPaaS players to enter in that market. And there were plenty of reasons for that and a lot of money on the table that would otherwise go to the Twilios of the world. I mean, as described earlier, I mean, we've seen CPaaS fairly more focused on early stage startups and later on to companies like large enterprises and Fortune 500 companies. However, between one and the other spectrum, there is almost a forgotten world of companies in the small business and the mid market. And those SMB companies, or sometimes as I call it, the yellow book market, are still in the early stage of modernization of their own internal workflows. And they are also endangered by the .com and internet boom that came on the last 2 decades. Often budget is little oriented to embrace a technology shift, so they may not have a lot of technical stuff in house, and we won't find much more than just a couple of technical folks with the responsibility to keep Office licenses and antivirus up to date. Yet the SMB and mid market is really the driving strength of local economies, right? So, and the main target of the public investment, especially when it comes to modernized workflows. I mean, if you look at that, considering the large percentage of these companies represent the market today and their profiles, it does not come as a surprise to see office software-oriented houses like Microsoft and even enterprise infrastructure providers like Amazon wanted also to join the party. They already know these players. They already know most of these companies, so it should be an easy move. They already serve a big chunk of the enterprise segment. It should be easy to help that market also to adopt to a new tech like a CPaaS provisioning, especially when it comes from someone who already sort of speaks their language. Bottom line is, and I think what I'm trying to say here is there is still a huge market to unveil for cloud communications, and that's one of the reasons why you see all those analytics provisions still very, very high on the CPaaS and cloud communications market. And it's a market where companies like Twilio and Nexmo will struggle to penetrate due to the very own nature and profile of these companies. They are very oriented to the internet startup, the .com companies, if you want. But when you look at the yellow pages kind of companies, it's a totally different world. You need to understand the business before you enter there. And that's why that leads me to the next chapter. Be where your customers are. So adapt or move or die. So we want to take the SMB market, the mid market, and the enterprise market. What is the challenge, right? These companies are seldom distributed into different silos that operate independently from each other. Maybe you have everyone using, I don't know, Microsoft Teams or 360, but then you'll find that IT is looking to use a different video conferencing software just because they don't like Teams. Or then you have a customer care service acquiring a very contact center specific software that is not really in line with the direction of the product marketing and logistics department are doing. And maybe you finally see the logistics folks trying to reuse what the IT marketing provides to their daily workflows. That might be optimized for sales or marketing, but definitely not for someone in the streets for delivery who often has their own software and smartphones to do it. So in essence, you'll find a company having differentiated needs across department, each using different platforms, having their preferred communication channels of choice, and we distribute the decision makers, and that makes the life extremely hard to explain something like cloud communications at once. To add to this complex world of the small medium business, you'll find them also often using the same sales channels for IT and telco provisioning, sometimes for more than 10 years. So they are used to work with the guy next door that comes, provides all the offering that they have, and they take it from there. This is of course a market where a Twilio-like provider is not really comfortable. I mean, Twilio and companies like Twilio, they were designed to me to be self-service oriented, and this kind of companies, they are not really expecting to do everything by themselves. They're still expecting some, if you want, some human touch. They're still expecting some guidance. They're still expecting someone who actually understands their language and speaks their language. Besides the challenge of working with distributed silo companies, these Twilio-like providers, they are also not designed at all to work with partnerships or channel programs. And this is where 8x8, I think, is doing a fantastic job. I mean, well established in the SMB and mid-market business. I mean, 8x8 has actually been rewarded multiple times for the way it works with channel partners. And as I've mentioned before, channel partners are still the best way to get into this side of business. And the opposite of the Twilios or the Nexmos of the world, 8x8 has been doing it for years. However, 8x8 has been focused mostly on voice and contact center solution for the past few years, helping these SMB and mid-market companies to move from an on-prem solutions to a native cloud with the award-winning X series. And this is already a big thing, right? So companies who were used to do I know to have those in-house Genesys or Cisco based solutions now take those and move to cloud. It's already a huge step. So, but that also help us understand how these companies think. And as I said, we also learned that different departments, within the very same company will have different needs. So if the production division has to send an SMS notification from its own software, I mean, 8x8 was not able to do it with the existing solutions. If the logistic department had to send a delivery notification from the system or an external third-party system they were using, they had to look for someone else to integrate that. On the other hand, if the IT department would need a video solution to remotely solve a customer or employee issue of any kind, they will have to rely on someone else or someone else's software. 8x8 realized that despite having an award-winning global communication cloud, that was still very much oriented and attached to the existing 8x8 software solutions. So the last mile was still kind of outside the reach. To overcome that situation and bring that last mile to reach, 8x8 went through a series of acquisitions and mergers in the past year, looking at what the X series were already doing successfully, and 8x8 decided to tackle the last mile problem by embracing the API and actually the CPaaS world for voice, video, and messaging. And everything started by bringing Jitsi and call stats to the 8x8 family. With Jitsi, obviously, I think most of you in my audience will probably know it. It's a well-known open source based video solution. So with this, 8x8 was able to improve even the existing UCaaS offering, but also enter into the standalone video API business as well. With call stats, I think most of you would also know call stats by now. 8x8 added a very powerful voice and video analytics system to the existing UCaaS and CCaaS solutions. And again, along the same lines, is now able to help standalone solutions as well, because it will offer also the SDKs and the API integrations. Because we know customers will always have niche and standalone voice and video solutions, very vertical specific sometimes, where existing 8x8 UCaaS and CCaaS solutions may not make much sense in those. Now 8x8 can still help the standalone and video and analytics API with call stats and Jitsi. After taking care of the video and the analytics APIs, 8x8 was still in need for conversational messaging and SMS APIs to complete the last mile cycle, right? So for that, it acquired a Wavecell, a strong CPaaS player in Asia Pacific that brought state-of-the-art messaging and chat apps APIs that would finally complement the cycle. So after all this round of acquisitions, 8x8 is really ready to tackle all the aspects in the SMB and the mid-market world, having now the tech under all the tech under the same umbrella, right? So, this is why it is so important to take the SMB and mid-market and enterprise business, because to them, CPaaS and APIs are an entirely new world. So cloud communications, apart from the contact centers and the UCaaS side of things, all the rest was an entirely new world. So no one better than the old companion 8x8, either through channel or partnerships, to actually walk through them and guide those companies to that. And this is why so many CPaaS and cloud communications providers fail to tackle this market, because they push for the way they are used to do things, and not the customer's way of doing things. And I think that's why 8x8 cloud communications offering is now so unique, right? So now traditional clients can really learn from an all-live partner on how to migrate their solutions to cloud communications, and at all levels, independently of the tech behind. Now, some takeaways. Before leaving, I would like to stress some of the key messages in the whole presentation. So CPaaS is old news. As I've told you today, I was already doing API-based communications 10 years ago. What is changing is really the audience, not so much the technology underneath, right? So with that change, CPaaS providers need to adapt the way they are telling the story, and increase the multiple ways customers have to build on top of their product. That leads me to the next point. It's not only about winning the developer anymore. I get really stressed when I see new CPaaS providers just trying to be what Twilio was 5 or 6 years ago, not really adding any value here. It essentially means that because they are unable to understand the new CPaaS markets, they prefer to go after the unsatisfied Twilio customers. That might bring some revenue in short, but won't take them to where CPaaS is really going right now. SMBs, mid-market, and enterprise sectors, and I think other new players are understanding as well. Look at what Microsoft recently announced. So finally, be where your customers are and adapt not only your product but also the way you sell it. For decades, 8x8 was very successful in understanding that the sales channel of choice for SMBs and mid market was partnerships, and the channel when driving the cloud communication market shift there. Now it is really time to reuse that channel to talk about CPaaS, programmable communications, in a language that these players and these companies do understand. And with that, I say thank you. I hope you like it. Thank you for your time again. Any additional information, you just follow one of the links on the next slide or reach out to me on LinkedIn. Thank you very much.